My introduction to the stories of Cordwainer Smith was through A Game of Rat and Dragon in some anthology decades ago. It introduced a universe where interstellar space is not simply a vacuum. There's something malicious lurking underneath space, held at bay by the light of stars, but waiting to pounce on any who try to traverse the void with the faster-than-light method known as planoforming. To ordinary people, there was nothing. Nothing except the shiver of planoforming and the hammer blow of sudden death with a dark, spastic note of lunacy descending into their minds. But to the telepaths, they were dragons. In the fraction of a second between the telepath's awareness of a hostile something out in the black, hollow nothingness of space and the impact of a ferocious, ruinous psychic blow against all living things within the ship, the telepaths had sensed entities something like the dragons of ancient human lore. Beasts more clever than beasts, demons more tangible than demons, hungry vortices of aliveness and hate compounded by unknown means out of the thin, tenuous matter between the stars. So ships needed a defense, which is provided by the pinlighters, telepaths who scan vast spans of space and direct immensely powerful light at the dragons the moment they manifest. But these men do not work alone. Pinlighters work in teams, each paired with a partner, which perceives the hostile entities not as dragons, but giant demonic rats. The partners are getting better. I've seen them pinlight two rats 46 million miles apart in 1.5 milliseconds. As long as people had to try to work the pin sets themselves, there was always the chance that with a minimum of 400 milliseconds for the human mind to set a pin light, we wouldn't light the rats up fast enough to protect our planoforming ships. The partners have changed all that. Once they get going, they're faster than rats, and they always will be. I know it's not easy letting a partner share your mind. It's not easy for them either, said Underhill. The pinlighter and the partner are telepathically linked throughout the journey, sharing their thoughts and functioning as one being. The partners are cats. And this separateness but mutual dependence between man and animal, between the rational, analytical, and the instinctive elements, is a central thread to the sprawling stories of the instrumentality and the rediscovery of man. There are vast strata of symbolism in these stories that we could unpack for hours, so I'm sticking to just the one key idea for this one. This is a partnership of different ways of perceiving. Human and cat not only see the entities as different things, but each brings necessary capabilities to the team, as though they're each half of the whole. But the instrumentality goes to great lengths to separate those halves in other ways over the centuries. You pinlighters, you and your damn cats! A nurse admonishes a pinlighter when, after waking in the hospital, the first thing he does is ask about his partner, Lady May. It's a very close bond, beyond any that we can experience through the filter of physical separation and language. She is a cat, he thought. That's all she is, a cat. But that was not how his mind saw her. Quick beyond all dreams of speed, sharp, clever, unbelievably graceful, beautiful, wordless, and undemanding. Where would he ever find a woman who could compare with her? It's kind of a strange story on its own and not generally the starting point to that world, but I found it to be an almost perfect entry point to Smith's work. The author wrote in layers of rhyming verses and sometimes subtle, sometimes blunt Christian allegory, but what really strikes me about his instrumentality stories is how they present snippets of the long history of humanity losing its essence as it expands out into the cosmos and the long struggle to reintegrate its fractured soul, for lack of a better term, all while presenting a critique of the technocratic state buried beneath its many other themes. It's important to note that the instrumentality, the governing body, is not evil. It's not a bunch of sadists or power-mad gluttons lording over the galaxy, but rather a professional governing body working toward and largely succeeding in delivering the greatest good for humanity as a whole. But it's a good as seen on a macro scale. Trillions of people over thousands of years. It doesn't care about you individually and can deliver a great deal of suffering without active malice. The far-seeing administrative state is almost Lovecraftian in that way. And it does its job a little too well on the materialist side of things. The instrumentality is a reminder that there's more to being human than being smart, that governing well isn't just about efficiency and systems, and that we're part of the universe, not the reason for it. As the partners foreshadow, there are many more stories about the human-animal duality, told through animals made into something almost human. under people, because in any society, someone needs to do the drudge work. Unskilled wage labor, slaves, or robots. The instrumentality opts for the latter too. So let's head down to Clowntown, shall we? The Dead Lady of Clowntown is a story about the beginning of the end of a social order. A story about a woman in the wrong place without prospects and a little dog girl waiting for a day that might never come. It's also an examination of the distortion of history and the psychological side of war. See, Cordwainer Smith is the pen name of Paul Linebarger, who was, among many other things, one of the organizers of the U.S. Army's first psychological warfare section during World War II. This one is a story of propaganda, of narrative creation, of the slow burn killing of a system without having to fire a single shot.
"I have killed, ma'am," he said, "as always, with love. This time, it was a system."
We begin with the story of Elaine. Elaine was a mistake. Her birth, her life, her career were all mistakes. Off to an auspicious start. She was born, or rather birthed, into a society where everything is expertly planned and efficiently executed. She was encoded with a vocation and the aptitude to do it well, and sent to a planet where those skills were needed. At least, that was the plan. The birthing facility was mostly automated. Very rarely was any intervention required, and so, on that rare day that it was, the young guy on station completely dropped the ball without even realizing it.
"Do shut up," said the man, but he knew the machine would not obey this. Without thinking, he turned to his other tune and sang the first two lines twice over. "Elaine, Elaine, go cure the pain. Elaine, Elaine, go cure the pain." Repetition had been inserted as a safeguard into the machine on the assumption that no real man would repeat an error. The name Elaine was not correct number code, but the fourfold emphasis seemed to confirm the need for a lay therapist female. The machine itself noted that a genuine man had corrected the situation card presented as a matter of emergency.
And so Elaine spends most of her life being useless, surplus to the needs of the world she's been settled on. She had been stamped, imprinted, designed, born, bred, and trained for this task. There was no task. Until one day she stumbles on a peculiar door.
That opening of a door changed her own world and changed life on thousands of planets for generations to come. But the opening was not itself strange. It was the tired caprice of a thoroughly frustrated and mildly unhappy woman. Nothing more. All the other descriptions of it have been improvements, embellishments, falsifications.
This story is told from the perspective of a historical commentator looking back long after the fact and framed as though the reader shares a common knowledge version of the events in question. Little corrections and tangents of this sort abound. The door leads to the old city, under the city she knows and seemingly abandoned, except for a little girl greeting her at the foot of the long stairs down. This is Dijon, D as in dog. She's a dog girl. Not like a little kid with a dog head or some furry stuff like that. Rather, she's a humanoid derived from dog genetic stock. She looks mostly human. The dog comes through mostly in the eyes and how she reacts.
Elaine's heart went out to her. The child looked up at her and shrank away. Elaine knew the meaning of those handsome brown eyes, of that muscular supplication of trust, that recoil from people. It was not a child at all, just some animal in the shape of a person. A dog, perhaps, which would later be taught to speak, to work, to perform useful services. The little dog girl directs her attention to a nearby information booth and runs off, leaving Elaine a bit perplexed. The booth, it turns out, houses an intelligence that is a lot more than a helpful interactive map. "Are you a person or are you a machine?" "Depends," said the voice. "I'm a machine, but I used to be a person long, long ago. A lady, in fact, and one of the instrumentality. But my time came, and they said to me, 'Would you mind if we made a machine print of your whole personality? It would be very helpful for the information booths.'"
Now, I'm not going to do the full play-by-play here. The short of it is that the machine, a copy of the mind of one of the lords of the instrumentality, the technocratic managers of galactic civilization, has been there for a very long time. And she has thought about the world, its injustices and flaws, and done a lot of calculations on how to change them. The instrumentality has been governing humanity for thousands of years, and in that time they've solved all the big problems. There's no hunger, no poverty, virtually no war, no disease, People live for 400 years almost exactly, and the entire galaxy has been settled. People are happy. Real people, that is. The true men. The underpeople, those animal-derived homunculi, have a different experience. But on this particular day, things are going to start to change. They, the underpeople, are introduced to a new philosophy of universal love for all, even their oppressors. Dijon is the avatar of this idea. Soon after, she leads the underpeople out into the city streets, confronts the police and 4 lords of the instrumentality, and her death is the beginning of a long process of change. But it's told from the perspective of a historical account correcting popular myths about the time. References are made to famous paintings of the event, to dramatizations, contrasting the embellishments with the more mundane reality of the situation. There are many famous paintings of that scene. Most of the paintings show Elaine in rags with the distorted, suffering face of a witch. This is strictly unhistorical. Now, before they confront the world, Dijon is artificially aged from a little girl to a young woman. This too is told as narrative and as historical correction to the widely known dramatized depictions. The biological machine did work well, though at the risk of her life. It made her into a vital, robust young person without changing her mind at all. This is hard for any actress to portray. The story boxes have the advantage. They can show the machine with all sorts of improvements. Flashing lights, bits of lightning, mysterious rays. Actually, it looked like a bathtub full of boiling brown jelly, completely covering Joan. Just Joan now, because she's symbolically no longer an animal, but a person. Now, she and Elaine lead a parade of homunculi out of Clown Town, proclaiming love for all mankind, which now includes themselves. At least, to themselves. They still have to convince everyone else. And they don't get far before police robots block their way. So, this society has a fairly clear social hierarchy. The lords of the instrumentality are on top, of course, and have great latitude in their authority. True humans are next, able to do pretty much what they want so long as they aren't causing harm or undermining the instrumentality. Robots and underpeople are slaves or equipment. They exist only so long as they serve a function. However, it's not just a hierarchy, but a system of laws. The robot police are there on orders of the instrumentality. But Elaine is a true human. The Lady Pankashash, the mental imprint of a long-dead member of the instrumentality, is really just a copy in a robot body. But she was one of the masters when she lived. Things get a little muddled. Then comes the unbelievable, which we now believe, the event for which the stars and worlds were unprepared. Mutiny. Robot mutiny. You are not really escaping 2 human commands. You are making a choice. You. That makes you men. There are 4 lords of the instrumentality present for this, and they all respond to it in different ways. Of them, the 2 women play the opposite sides at this moment. Destroy them all, said the Lady Garok. Malfunctioning robots and dangerous animals. Neutralize the danger in the most direct way. But there's also the Lady Arabella Underwood. She gives some ground. Perhaps they are people. They must have a trial. The dog girl Joan dropped to her knees. I have succeeded. I have succeeded. I have succeeded. But this can be a dicey move for those in power. And here we need to look at the author's background in psychological warfare to really appreciate what he does here. This isn't a revolution to seize power or to change legal structures. It's to change perception. It's about simultaneously making underpeople relatable to the true men and undermining the perception of legitimacy and infallibility of the instrumentality. To state the obvious, Joan is Jesus, not Lenin. Or even more obviously, Joan of Arc. Yeah, they burn her at the stake, but I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. The revolution is over. Nothing had really happened, but Joan had forced people to meet her. This was nothing like the poem about people and underpeople getting all mixed up. The mix-up came much later, even after the time of Kumail. The poem is pretty, but it is dead wrong, as you can see for yourself. You should ask me, because I know. I used to live on the Eastern Shore. Men aren't men, and women aren't women, and people aren't people anymore. There is no Eastern Shore on Fomalhaut 3. Anyhow, the people-underpeople crisis came much later than this. The revolution had failed, but history had reached its new turning point. But on that day, the soldiers slaughtered the rabble. They shot goat men and a little fox boy, stomped rat babies into the pavement, all while a dog woman writhed in the flames. And they recorded it all, to give it context, and as a warning. A bad idea can spread like a mutated germ. If it is at all interesting, it can leap from one mind to another halfway across the universe before it has a stop put to it. And spread this one does. The reforms were incremental rather than a sudden toppling of the social order, but things could never go back the way they'd been before. As a later story puts it, people do not understand the teaching of Joan, that whatever seems human is human. Dogs, man's best friend, as they say, can give us a level of devotion we rarely find with our own kind. Dijon really personifies that, a universal love for mankind. But we have another friend, more devious and fickle, but no less bound to us, bringing us to the story of Kamel. As you may have guessed, a cat woman. Again, she looks human. She's just derived from cat stock. A lot has happened since the time of Joan. The underpeople now have some manner of legal rights, though certainly not equal rights. The slavery of the past has been replaced with a sort of apartheid. They do vital work in almost every sphere of the economy, but they live in their own areas. They have their own distinct currency. They have essentially a capitalist market economy functioning inside of the post-capitalist world of the true humans.
Human beings and hominids had lived so long in an affluent society that they did not know what it meant to be poor. But the lords of the instrumentality had decreed that underpeople, derived from animal stock, should live under the economics of the ancient world. They had to have their own kind of money to pay for their rooms, their food, their possessions, and the education of their children. If they became bankrupt, they went to the poorhouse, where they were killed painlessly by means of gas.
The human world has changed dramatically too. They've rejected the regimented, managed perfection of the old ways and have embarked on the rediscovery of man, bringing back the old languages and old cultures, celebrating all those inconvenient differences instead of making them conform. They've dropped their obsession with safety and let some risk come back into life. And it's in this context that Kamel meets Lord Gestacost. Gestacost was one of the few true men who believed in the rights of the underpeople. He did not think that mankind would ever get around to correcting ancient wrongs unless the underpeople themselves had some of the tools of power, weapons, conspiracy, wealth, and above all, organization with which to challenge man. Kamel's story isn't neatly laid out. It's spread across several stories, each of which tells a piece. But the common element is that while Dijon fills the role of martyr, Kamel is more a facilitator, a midway point between two worlds and an intermediary between elements that can't otherwise be in direct contact. In this instance, Gestacost, one of the lords of the instrumentality. But his partner, Kamel herself, was there ever an odder diplomat in the history of worlds? The Ballad of Lost Kamel has never been one of my favorite stories, but it's a core piece of this one. With Kamel acting as a telepathic conduit, Gestacost directly aids the underpeople in a way that could be seen as subversive, even treasonous, but he's acting on a moral imperative, though tempered. He helps them find secret routes and forgotten corners of the underground where they could gather and escape the death sentences that came with even the smallest perceived infractions. Despite bringing Kamel into the inner sanctum of the instrumentality and feeding her information, Gestacost isn't a wild-eyed revolutionary. He's more an incrementalist civil rights activist. I'm mad, all right, mad for justice, and this strikes me as simple justice. I'm not asking for equal rights, merely for a little more justice for them. In another story, Alpha Ralpha Boulevard, Kamel acts as a guide, nudging people along on their journey to rediscover their own messy humanity. In this case, a young couple trying out new experiences like using money, falling in love, being French. But the bulk of Kamel's story is in the latter half of the book Norstrilia. So, some background. Norstrilia, as in New North Australia, is a world with a single export. But that export is strewn, a drug that greatly extends lifespans. Consequently, the farmers of Norstrilia are fabulously wealthy. But they don't want to lose their connection to the land and become fat and lazy. They want to remain rugged frontier farmers. So they impose a 20 million% tariff on imported goods. The average Norstrilian strewn farmer could live like a multi-billionaire on any other world, and some of them choose to do so, renouncing their hereditary claims in the process. Enter Roderick Frederick Ronald Arnold William MacArthur McBann the 151st. With the help of a very old but extremely capable computer acquired by his grandfather, Rod manipulates the strewn market, becomes the richest man ever, and buys the earth. Naturally, this makes him many enemies, so he goes to Earth in disguise. As a catman, Karad. The cover, arranged for him by sympathetic figures within the instrumentality, includes having Kamel pose as his wife and keep him from getting himself killed through ignorance. I'll leave most of Rod's story for another time. The hate hall, his time with the Catmaster, the Ateli Kelly. What matters here is that the rediscovery of man, the uncovering of lost knowledge, and the rejuvenating of the stale, ossified husk of mankind is the work of the underpeople.
You underpeople are taking charge of people. If you're fixing up their cultures for them, you're getting to be the masters of men. Yes, said Kamel, and let the explosive affirmative hang in the air between them.
It isn't a takeover, but a quiet partnership. As the underpeople acquire a slow dribble of justice and rights, so the true men are gradually reintroduced to chance, to work, to freedom. Rod's role here, facilitated by Kamel, is to provide resources for that long process.
I offer you a tangible bargain. Tell me if you find I read your mind correctly. Rod nodded, somewhat in awe. You want your money, but you don't want it. You will keep 500,000 credits, FOE money, which will leave you the richest man in old North Australia for the rest of a very long life. The rest you will give to a foundation, which will teach men to hate easily and lightly, as in a game, not sickly and wearily as in habit. The trustees will be lords of the instrumentality, whom I know. And what do I get? Your heart's desire.
That last bit's a tad complicated. We'll revisit Norstrilia someday. For now, the rediscovery of man takes another step forward, a symbiotic process. Humanity has uplifted the animals into fully sapient beings, and they then help save us from ourselves. And it's not some sudden jolt that reorders the world, but rather a gradual shift. The problem took thousands of years to get chronic, and it'll take a few centuries at least to fix it. The book leaps forward by decades in short intervals at the end, reinforcing that it's a story of incremental social change. It's a changing of perception and public opinion, with the resources of Rod's Foundation being a part of that. Changing the world over time through PR and NGOs, rather than with one shattering blow from a revolutionary vanguard. Lasting change takes time. There are many more stories set in this world, spanning millennia, some referencing these events and many others not. And despite not being entirely concluded, it's a rich, sometimes horrifying, often whimsical world revealed in thin slices. But woven through it all is this idea of humanity fracturing itself in the relentless pursuit of perfection and order, losing something vital, and finding ourselves again with the help of our less order-obsessed partners, our longtime companions, the dog and the cat. On that note, I'm going to donate any money that this video makes in the first month to two animal rescues, Paws for Paws in Tucson, Arizona, and the Cat Alliance Team Sanctuary in Sherwood, Oregon. Links are in the description if you want to help out the Desert Doggos or West Coast House Lions. I hear the sounds of humans on the wind. My time here is short.